Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Crux of It podcast. I'm Heather Saunders, the founder and principal of Crux Design Studio. At Crux, we partner with some of the world's leading organizations to design workplaces, laboratories, retail spaces, and innovation spaces that help people and businesses perform at their best. We work globally, bringing together strategy, architecture, and interior design to create spaces that aren't just beautiful. They're purposeful, practical, and built around the people that use them. This podcast is an extension of those conversations. The crux of it is where we explore ideas, trends, and challenges shaping the future of workplace design, innovation, and business. We speak with industry leaders, clients, and experts sharing insights, stories, and practical takeaways that we hope will inspire you wherever you are in your own journey. I'm really excited to be joined today by my guest, Zoe Ellis-Moore. Zoe brings a wealth of experience and a fresh perspective to our conversations. And together, we'll be digging into what really sits at the heart, the crux of topics we're discussing. So with that, Zoe, why don't you introduce yourself?
So thank you so much, Heather, and for inviting me today. But I suppose to give you a background to myself, I'm Zoe Ellis-Moore, as was mentioned, but very much with Spaces to Places, we're working with providers in the sector, flex office sector, and I would say that's very much from co-working to service to manage. And really, it's the data and insights, but also the other part is marketing. So creating the right spaces, but then how do you attract the right audience there as well? And then the other part is now with Office Tier List, a new part that we've just launched in March, which is about end users and helping end users find right workspaces for them and really understanding the plethora of different options in this world that exists with different workspaces and making it much more accessible to get great workspaces.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. So we'll go a little bit back on your journey. So looking back, it feels like you've been trying to answer the same question for all along. Why do some places thrive while other places struggle? Is that a fair reflection of what you do?
Yes, and I suppose that comes back to Spaces to Places, to be quite honest, why the name of the company is Spaces to Places. Like 22 years working in commercial property, always, understanding those dynamics. For me, very much a space is empty, soulless, and a place has people and purpose. There's quite a difference between a house and a home. And and that's always the one that in some ways people call it placemaking, that can be quite airy fairy because there's no substantial data. And when you look at social impact and the bigger impact that places do have on communities, that's what makes it wishy-washy. But for me, some of those fundamentals is understanding your local neighbourhood and area. That's why we're always, the first part of any work we do is more research, understanding location nuances, and then you're going, what is the need there to build the right proposition? So that's crucially what Space to Place has always been about, and throughout sort of my passion there from Kingston first and the first business improvement district, and really pioneering with the team there to go, we need to create, a whole town centre that works for everybody as well. And then understanding the complexities. I think the hard one, though, with anything like placemaking, is that balance between commerciality, I would say, and community. It is a fine line, and sometimes that's the hard one that, we know with property, a lot of it comes back to actually, is it financially viable? Is it giving the returns needed? So I'm always balancing that careful line sometimes between the two.
Yeah, I mean, we can absolutely relate of what is required and needed versus what there is budget for and what there'll actually be return on is very difficult. How do you express that to your clients? How do you have those conversations and make that fine decision?
It also depends on clients because are you holding an asset for a long term? You can do much more sort of placemaking activation if you're actually going to hold on to those assets. I think the hard one that we often find, if somebody's looking to flip and make quick returns in a short period, that's when they don't want to invest into the local neighborhood, so like sponsoring something locally and really building up a community because they're quick in and out. So that is, it's always understanding somebody's objectives, with a building or an area of what is the grander vision. That's often what, where we see the great sort of placemaking done is when there's a master vision and everybody's holding on for those assets for a longer term return.
Do you help them build that master vision? Because a lot of them perhaps don't have that. They might have the assets, but they haven't really pulled together the master vision yet. Do you help them build that?
Yeah, and I think that's always where asking the right questions. So sometimes it's usually, quite honestly, it goes back to just fill the space often, and that's where we sort of digest and understand what they're doing. And a lot we do see is hope marketing. People do just chuck that, going, I've got empty space, just, market to everybody, pay the highest commission just to fill the space. And often our biggest one is always going back to, well, what's the neighbourhood? What's the need? Who should we be reaching out to? What is the demand? Because essentially, property is always supply and demand. It's those dynamics. And yeah, too many times I think it isn't asking the right questions. So we're very much more inquisitive sort of curiosity going, why is that person in that building now? Let's get a lookalike audience. What's your audience type? How can we get more of those similar businesses as opposed to there's too much scattergun marketing generally in property. I think too much scattergun approached, and it's just like just fill the space
See
with
what sticks.
yeah, fill it, fill it with whoever wants to come in this building, as opposed to going strategically, what is the best, you know, very much mix. Is it a mix of businesses? And you'll see, even with shopping malls, or my background much more, a lot is done on making sure that tenant occupier mix is right, that you have an anchor, but is it blended with some small independent, and really thinking about the right mix. So when it's done well, nobody notices. I think that's the problem. It's it's always the way when it goes hideously wrong, when people have empty buildings and desperation kicks in, it's always the hardest because constantly they're just like, oh, we've got one lead, we're hoping it's miraculously going to happen. And we're finding a lot with offices, it's not happening. And we're saying you need to start looking into being more flexible, looking to flex offering, because now end users are demanding much more plug and play. They're asking for shorter contracts. This is the way that people are working now. So I think that's sometimes people, the only way they learn is the hard way in property in some ways, where it's an empty space for very long void periods. Some of they're the hardest, or the other hardest projects we work on is somebody's opened a space and it's empty. And it's just like, well, why didn't you do any of the marketing? They've invested so much into this building and the fit out, and they thought build it and they will come. That happens so often. We get the phone call and go, oh, that's so much harder. A pre-sale is so much.
2 years of yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think that comes back to what you're saying, the strategy not being there in the first place, and that vision of knowing who they're attracting. Sometimes it's much more ego. I want to build a wonderful building and stuff, without going, oh, who's using the building? How are they going to use the building? I don't know if you find the same, but yeah, that's our
I,
sticking.
yeah, I think we do find it the same, but in a different way. And so there the occasion where the budget is set, but the requirement is, for instance, for more technical, and technical's more money, or they don't have fresh air delivery, so no one wants to stay in the space past 1, 2 p.m. because they're lagging and they're feeling tired, or they're feeling stuffy, or they're feeling, anxious in the environment. Well, that has to do with fresh air delivery, and but nobody looks up at a ceiling and says, "Oh, that is a great air handling unit," right? I'm so glad that you spent 60% of your budget above the ceiling grid, but it's needed. And so we're constantly having those discussions of, we understand what you want at ground level. We want, of course, everyone wants a compelling environment, and similar to what you said before, where nobody notices exactly why a space is designed well, because you walk into it and it just feels comfortable. You're not jarred in any way. And that's a well-designed space. But then the layer on top of that is expensive of how do you make it optimally performing? That has to do with a lot of bits you cannot see. and it needs to start earlier than later. You can't retrofit it. It's so much more expensive. So very similar. The earlier you get us involved, the better it is, right?
Yes.
You built your career around understanding how people engage with spaces. In your experience, what is it that makes most people choose one place over another?
Place over another. Of course, we're always going to have different factors, and that's what I love about this sector. That traditionally, with marketing hat on and stuff, you're taught the four P's of marketing. They still apply with property. But I would say then you add on the service layer as well, and then there's more P's as well. I think it's much harder than ever than a sort of FMCG product. Why people choose place. There's so many multiple factors.
I think we
Some
just in case people don't know marketing language, fast moving consumer goods is what she's
Yes, yeah.
two
And I would
things.
say those the core ones, it's always like the place, the price, the promotion there that's key. And so with the four P's of marketing, if we think to the basics, it is the place. The place is critical. We also need to think about the product. Is it co-working? Is it serviced? Is it managed? Is it leased office? I'm talking thinking about sort of very much um, sort of offices in this sort of context there. Then thinking about the pricing is important as well. So is it high end, low end? What's the pricing point? Which area is it in? And then you can think about what promotion, what is the vibe? And so there's some of the ways that people analyze with buildings, of course, but it is also there's an emotional element, one part, that I think is crucial that people forget. People do also think on logic as well. There's very much sort of the analytical mind. But I think with motion, where people are really deciding on workspaces or anything offices, is how do they feel in the space? When you go into a space, do you see yourself there? I think that is the crucial one that if you're taking space and you're investing in space, you're going to do tours. And it is, how does it make you feel? Do you feel accomplished? Like some places I go into, and instantly you just feel accomplished. You feel like you're there. It makes you a good vibe. Others, it might just, might feel like this isn't your right brand, for your business. So that's the crucial one that sometimes is there's so much complexity around decision making, but we do find often on those tours and stuff why people choose places. It is them going back a few times. How does it make them feel? Do they feel like they're looked after? But even on the value offering in the market, we see some really high end ones that all your needs are looked after there. You've got restaurants on site and everything else. But still, even the most value sector, sometimes it is that service. How does does it match your needs? If you just want a head down and you're a productive person, is that ticking your box there? Sometimes people aren't looking for bells and whistles on that side. And I think that's the understanding that you know, the sector is so diverse that we get excited about that. I think it is, with people making decisions, some people are looking more for productive space. So when you think of offices, others are looking for wellness. They're looking for all the extras there. We've done quite a lot of research on the voice of the customer, and that was quite interesting. Like 50% actually nearly looking for those wellness factors, whether it's support and, programs being running for incubators to, is it more social and activities happening? So people are looking for that wellness activities. And then the others are looking more, some of them much more, they're ambitious businesses, they're wanting to have that innovation part as well. So it does come down to one office and what suits one person with all those dynamics of sort of the four P's and then extending it to the sort of seven P's of service and more P's is still understanding your customer and your needs of where you fit in those sort of those spectrums of their needs and wants. Do they want control? Are they a maximizer, productivity person? Are they enjoyment person that's looking for other people and getting that support there? Or are they looking for that ambition? Are they sort of more wanting to be pushed and sort of much more that competitive working environment? I think that's the interesting thing. There's totally different sort of personas for people taking offices and where they fit.
Yeah, that's so true. I actually had an experience yesterday. I've done a bunch of work in India, and India claims taxes. So I'm now in this process of getting a bit of a tax, I guess, relief from UK taxes based on this agreement that they have. So anyway, a lot of lawyers. So to get this money back, there's a whole lot of lawyers, there's a whole lot of accountants on both sides that I now need to pay in order to get this done. So it's a bit annoying to get the money back. But I was at a lawyer's office yesterday, and he said, and honestly, I said to him, if this was in New York, I would have run away because
Yeah.
the entrance was up a back fire staircase. And then I had to walk on a roof to a green door that was all chipped in paint and walk through said door and then into his very, very kind of, what's the word? He reminded me of a professor that had been at it for, 40 years. And like everything had a book and the shelves were all misaligned and on angles. And it definitely had a romantic quality about it, kind of Notting Hill-esque, but it was not a high performing office. So after a while, he said, well, what do you do? And I said, oh, I build offices. I said, I could do your office. Would you like a new office? He goes, well, I quite like my office. And I said, oh, I do too. It's lovely. Which is true in a way, but also, I guess, a reflection of everybody's different. This works for him. And he had admitted that he first took that property before I was born. And that was a few years ago. So I was thinking, wow, he spent his whole career here and he loves it. But would I? No, because Crux wants a place where we can feel really proud to bring our clients and showcase what it is that we can do. So our needs are very, very different than others. And that's only the start of the conversation. So I can only imagine how many
And I think that's the
personality traits you're
interesting thing, that too much, I think, because we work in offices, we think we know what that audience wants.
looking. Yeah,
Time and time, it's so easy to go, oh, and I think any decision makers go, I work in an office, I know what I would want, hence that's what I open in an office. And it's sometimes flipping. I think the build to rent sector is really fascinating, or student accommodation, where they're just doing constant surveys going, how do we improve this building? Because a lot of those decision makers designing student accommodation don't really, they don't understand, and they're admitting, they're going, I don't understand this audience. We're not in an age bracket. They do lots of research. And I'm always quite impressed with some of the detail they're doing, that research, going, we don't do this for offices. This whole sector is doing way more, than sort of the office sector that's bigger, to actually understand the different types of audiences. And so that's constantly what surprises, me, that still it's quite some often with offices quite set, and what sort of
and
standards.
forcing what
Yes.
their interpretation is of the
Yeah.
end user
And it's
required.
not and it's not until we've seen so many other workspaces, like I would say, TradeStar, which is vibrant colours, bold, but creative, it's really taking a different slant, and they're changing the door sizes, making them larger, bright colours, and just that whole vibe going, it's nice to see something completely different, going, you want to walk past, looking and poke, put your head in to see what,
Catch your
business.
eye. What's
Yeah.
happening here?
So
Yeah.
they allow that, and then they've got signage that makes it more like a street and stuff. So
Mm,
sometimes I think that's where, people are starting to push it.
yeah.
And like, I love that, but for different reasons, that you feel you're part of a community, but there's all different sort of streets, like you're walking down different streets, not corridors. And it's just
Yeah.
like, oh, that is awesome, but
Yeah.
that appeals to me from retail background and sort of curiosity, but others might not. But that's the
Yeah.
vibe that they're creating, that they want to make it much more open. I've seen some offices that they have shutters that bring it up, set and down.
Yeah.
Thinking Hoxton, we're working from, love how they're doing it. So if the business wants to be separated, they just bring their shutters
And
down and they
yeah.
can look at them. But if they want to open up into the wider communal area, they can be part of the communal area as well. So I think really seeing sort of newer ways to go, what do people want? And I think the hard one is, though, customers. There's always contradictions. One minute they're saying, oh, we want really quiet, and the next minute they're like going, oh, we want really noisy workspace.
Yeah.
And then I think that's the hard one, where we've done lots of research, and sometimes it's like, you're just contradicting yourself the whole time, that you're saying you want this, you want that. And yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's the hard one with customers. That's, yeah, pinning them down.
that's so interesting. Well, along that lines, what have you noticed with people that have changed over the past decade? Has there been any dramatic, I guess we have COVID worked into there as well. So is there,
For me, if you take it back, we used to work 7 days on the farm in some ways, then we
mm,
worked 6 days in the factory, then we worked 5 days in the office. We're now moving to much more 4 days, but the 4 days are being spread over, the can
yeah,
work the whole week and stuff like
yeah,
that. I think definitely, but it's where we're working from. The where we're working from has changed dramatically, and I think that's where technology has also enabled that working from anywhere is possible. And the role of an office much more, becoming much more that magnet to bring people together and a different purpose. And actually, you shouldn't just have back-to-back meetings and come into the office for that. You need to go, actually, let's do something different there. So I say for me, and it's much more a lifestyle. We've now seen the other trends, the sort of bigger symbiotic trends and stuff. It used to be much more work-life separation. Now it's very much blurred. Also, places are blurred, and sort of hotels are blurred into offices. They've all blurred. Even apartments blurring with designs and different things. We've seen much more blurring across all the different sort of sectors as well. And so, yeah, we're much more lifestyle. I would say what's really changed now, it's all about your lifestyle. You've got much more options. So where you work, where you live, you're choosing your lifestyle. I think you've got much more options in life. So it's lifestyle choices. People are deciding where they work for a lifestyle. Does that brand represent them much more? So that's the biggest, oh, I would say some of these biggest shifts that we've seen. And with COVID, all these things happening before, but it definitely escalated. We were all worker bees before, to be quite honest, in those cubicles and the hours we worked and stuff. It's been quite liberating on how dramatically these trends are now blending inside out and everything. So I think it's much more blended across the board now. So I'm excited to see. And I think that 9 till 5 working, people have changed their hours to suit them with, yeah, moving much more to lifestyle working as well.
not me. Feel like I'm working harder than
But I think it's that passion. I think that's the other one that's come out of it, and people working harder and stuff. You're doing things because you're much more passion and mission led and
yeah,
purpose. And so then it's sort of that blending of a lifestyle going, actually, you enjoy what and that side as well. Like
yeah,
sometimes I'm happier working, yeah, Saturday morning, Sunday, it is blended. I'm happy to blend it much more at the
yeah.
time when I feel like doing something. And I think that's the biggest change and stuff. But I think much more larger corporates being able to understand that dynamic, yeah, is the hard one with rigid structures where it's so.
Yeah, I think that as well. Even as you know, my husband's in the industry as well, and he very much believes everyone should be in the office at all times. And I'm different. As you know, we run a very
Yeah.
international company. A lot of our employees don't live here. And so I'm very open to having those discussions. I quite like that our graphic designer lives in Thailand. She's, 8 hours ahead of us. So what she can accomplish when she wakes up by the time we wake up, I absolutely love it. And then we can feed back to her in our working period. And then we know as soon as we end our day, she's picking it right back up. So there's just this constant delivery of information, which I think is
So
fantastic.
but
Yeah,
and put like the ones that are used to offices of 9 to 5 working, it's much more control. It's a maximizer, maximum time, maximum
yeah,
time in the office, maximum performance. It's a maximizer of sort of personality.
yeah,
Where now we're seeing this wellness supporter functionality, person there. We're now seeing those innovators, that the high growth innovation sort of startup companies that want competitive working environments. So we're now seeing some much more. I think we're going to see much more with company dynamics, being able to understand company cultures much more. That we're seeing, I think that's where we're looking in firmographic data. That I think is fascinating that we don't have as the same ones that we have like demographic data and all those other ones to make. I think firmographic data is going to suddenly change as we start to know, is it, I don't know, a PE backed company, high startup, or is it an accountancy that's been, I would say running 25
Data
years?
driven. Yeah.
Yeah, data driven, they're going to have different personality. Even recruitment, you can have such different personalities of recruitment firms. But I think Sitcos or anything just classifies a business this type of business. But actually, you can have a recruitment company that's much more orientated to sustainability. You can have a recruitment company that's orientated to much more.
Investment banking or C-suite
Yeah,
positions, or pharmaceuticals, which are more scientific, regulatory driven. And then you've got your D&B, which is,
yeah.
high energy, work hard, play hard kind of spot. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's where that blending is, that we've been so used to putting everybody in boxes the whole time. I think that's the other one now, that we'll see more different type of cultures because people are working for choosing a business. Does it work with them? Do they want to be in 5 days a week, or are they looking for a hybrid, more lifestyle working approach? So people are choosing which companies they work for as well based on the culture, much more than ever before, I would say.
Yeah, yeah, that makes good sense. Yeah, I'm just thinking about everyone that I've met even recently, and just thinking, oh yeah, they would fit into this package, and they would fit over here. And then how we design around it. It was the other thing that I was thinking of yeah,
Yeah,
just the quiet places where more of the quieter engineers or actuarials or, you know, I don't know, astrophysicists, they probably need a very pin drop, quiet, private space for them to really start percolating their ideas. Whereas the more dynamic individuals that would be maybe the marketeers or the business developers, they want energy and they want flow. So what does that space look like? And what does the furniture and acoustics support? So that's really interesting. That's just making my mind go a little bit.
few AI companies are really deep in AI and stuff like that. They're talking about they're going back to sort of plain walls and writing on the walls and things, that they've been
Mm.
building out rooms and much more having those town hall forum sort of spaces, because they're like going, you shouldn't be back to back meetings, send a bot to those meetings in some ways. If you're all just sitting on meetings and stuff like that, if they're
What are you
not,
actually achieving? What's,
why are you
yeah,
coming to the office? The junior colleagues especially people need to be available
yeah,
to others. And so they're really, I think that's the interesting one, flipping it on your head. But also when you're working so deep now at such fast speeds, you need outside space to sort of actually decompress now much more. And I think we've seen much more with outside space, but also just to escape, those escapism places, because it's, I think, got so much faster that we're moving so bang, bang, bang fast to allow for that as well.
I think that is true. I think people are more and more tired, aren't they? Because they are just producing all the time. And even though there is this blur, there's
Yeah.
also the blur can be confusing. And so one could feel like, actually, because there's a blur, I'm always working because I'm never totally shutting down. It's not like 5 p.m., shut the screen. Now I'm with my family or my friends or my partner. I'm still thinking, and I might take a quick email when they go to the toilet at our dinner night out. But then I'm going to be back in their presence. But it does have that kind of slog effect to your brain of, when do I relax? When do I see outside? When do I get in nature? When do I take a breath? Which is important. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Okay. So leadership and judgment, there's always a tension in leadership between intuition and evidence. Having built a business around research, where do you think instinct still has its place?
Instinct does always have a place, but I think it's, you built up instinct knowing your audience, and I think that's where, having seen instinct's always based on something else. It isn't just on a whim. I think that's what you always know with instinct. Something prior has told you in this scenario
This
it's
works,
going
this
to go.
doesn't work.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
done previously. Sometimes I think that's that word instinct. Sometimes you can't know exactly why you think that specific thing is good or bad. But something prior in your history and all of your experiences told you. So I always think it does play a part, because it's something ringing for me is always something ringing in the back of your head going,
I've seen this before. I can't quite remember where, but yeah.
So yeah, we're always data orientated to a point. I think always when you look at leadership and stuff like that, Barack Obama's always just like, he said he needed like 51% of the information to make a decision. Because you can get too much data overload now. There's so much data giving you the right information to make a decision clearly. Data is really key there. But sometimes it's just, especially when you're doing thematical sort of like investing or anything like that, some things that's on trend, going actually these trends are going this way and stuff. So I think it's always going to be a mixture of both, analytics always, and then it's that emotional side as well. The intelligence is always going to be your brain works, half and half as well.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's very good actually, because bringing the information that you've acquired from your research plus the information that you have from your past experience and you bring that together and that becomes instinct in how you drive forward. And then there's course correct, isn't there? There's never I'm staying on one path forever indefinitely. There's always a quite likely you're 2% off and the story goes you don't even come close to your end destination unless you course correct steadily and move forward. And I think that's with information, isn't it? With and further experience.
Yeah, yeah. We're wanting to move so quickly as well, I think, but knowing which decisions you can reverse and which ones you can, going actually speed's more important. Sometimes where I'm like going, actually it's more important speed, let's go, you go because speed's the essence versus some other ones, it might be that you can't, the only ones that is probably what you need to spend more time on is more where you can't reverse them easily. Uh, because most decisions you can pivot if needs be. There is a fallback plan. There is something else there.
And I
Because
can imagine that, well, I don't know, but I'm imagining that you're thinking about an investment of 30 million into a building. That's a little bit more difficult to backtrack on.
we would always do scenarios. So with space places, our theory is always we put out scenarios. So then everybody works out the pros and cons of every scenario with the building.
Yeah.
And not every scenario. There's always keep as is. There's always exit and sell, and then we have a mix of what the product mix or what the pricing mix could be in the middle that we do with clients. But I think for us, it's can you flip it? Is there a few different use cases? Can you convert it into residential? Can you, when we're looking at values and things like that, always thinking ahead of other use classes of what's needed there and what's viable, what's not. Often buildings that we look at, it's sometimes not the most obvious solution. You can go, oh no, you can look at a part hotel. You can look at sometimes it is those creative solutions that we look at. Somebody had like space, they had a lot of car parking available, and they had some offices. We're just like going, well, why don't you get enterprise in there? And they were like going, oh, I suppose that's right, because they had all this car parking and enterprise and they were near the sort of motor trade. And sometimes that's where our sort of broader thinking sometimes is like going, that's the most obvious solution. You can get a franchise in and yeah, those things happen. But it is sometimes thinking wider. That's is that wider thinking that people always like, oh, office is done this way, this is the only way. We're often going, actually, let's cut it up in a few different ways. But knowing our scenario planning is quite exciting when people go, oh, if this doesn't work, I've got other, build it knowing I could change it into some other use classes if it's an issue or something like that. Often we've looked at buildings because they can't get planning permission for something else. That's not that they're currently doing serviced office because they're struggling to get planning. And so looking at, is it interim or what else can we possibly?
That's planning can be quite difficult in this country.
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
We have to go through it all the time. And yes, it's not a gentle process, is it?
I think there's no hard and fast rules, and I think that's the one. It's like,
Exactly. I love that you keep your open mind to see possibilities. I think for us, we're working on a project where we both are working on, and the clientele is heavily from one culture. and an immigrant culture. And I'm so intrigued. What I want to dive into is like, what sports do they love, and how are they supported? And as you were kind of talking about earlier, like, let's not go against the grain here. Let's go with the, this massive tendency that you have, and support them even further, and just curate the experience for them. So, um, yeah, I think what you do is probably, well, I know I do, because you and I talk about it endlessly, but I just find it very fascinating. And every time I talk to you, you have more layers that you're looking at. And I was like, the student accommodation, I was like, oh, I love that idea. Like, that's out of the box. And enterprise, yeah, commercial, what's the word? Subcontracting to these spaces. Fantastic idea. Really, really quite valuable to your clients, I think.
It's always that curiosity though. It's like
Mm,
fascination the whole time, going, what's possible? What do people want? And the curiosity of others is always
yeah,
exciting. And keeping learning. I think, like you say, the amount of masters that you've done, constantly learning on that side.
constantly. Yes, always taking on the lessons learned. I think lessons learned are always important to look at. And I think this podcast largely kind of reflects the lessons learned, and how we can do better as we progress our career, and our products for our clients. I'd love to switch to Office Tier List
Okay,
now,
yes.
because you've recently launched it, and it's quickly becoming a talking point, I think, across the workplace community. I think it's a brilliant product. What inspired you to create it, and what gap did you feel was missing in the conversation?
Well, I suppose it has been built up, running these places to 7 years, understanding how the sector works. Also, just seeing this diversity of different offering. That was really where we constantly wanted to educate end businesses. And we get asked lots of questions. So it was very much like, how can we service wider audience in some ways, especially end user businesses, to educate them into very much, especially flex offices. Most businesses think it's WeWork and Regis. Those are the biggest brands that spend the most money. So people also have quite a lot of perceptions already. They don't realize there's a bigger mix that's available. So that was part of the rationale. The other one that we've just seen in the industry of what's happening with sort of commissions really increasing. So from the broker's side, constantly now it's usually standard 10%, but keeps on nudging up to now pay on the second year, sort of 5%. So that's sort of the mix, from much more the brokerage side. Most of the industry, especially London, is dominated by brokers.
Mm.
And then the other part is we're just seeing operators, great operators, being squeezed on costs constantly. And for them, with brokerage side, having to pay on that straight up front, the year's sort of 10% is a hard hit on them financially. Seeing that, costs have gone up, either the fit out, staffing cost, everything's gone up. So really seeing that sort of pain points, from that side of the providers, and also then end users going, we need to bring them together as much more a simple matchmaking system. The other part of the dimension for us is always our data transparency, being independent. So it naturally blended what we were doing already, and being customer centric and first. And we were like going, why isn't there much more like Monza Starling did for banking, and flipping it on its head and going, let's build it for the end user, end business, as opposed to the industry. I feel so much with what's happened in the industry, with especially offices, has been just, it's been built for the industry and commission structures and everything else. AI is shifting that, where businesses want top level information really easily. We're seeing more with the LLMs, people searching. So your Perplexities, your Geminis, your Claude, your Chat GPTs, people are putting in quite complex searches and needing to serve up good quality information. There's quite a lot of slop in the office industry. So we were like going, we can service great quality information, verified as well, to the LLMs, so people can find workspaces and get excited and go direct. So it's a matchmaking service. I see it much more for, and like, get back to those dynamics of supply and demand. We've got providers one side, and then we've got end users the other side, bringing together in the easiest, simplest way on a platform. That's what it's about, without any friction. So yeah, that's where it's come
Market
about.
culture without having an agent involved, fees, a pushy landlord trying to sell you a product that you may not want.
And
And
it's,
you just get to
yeah,
take a look around and get an honest understanding of the offering before you make an investment. And I guess it's also feedback to the landlord of where their current offering stands and what the feedback is on the offering so that they can decide if that's how they want to represent themselves or if they need a refresh or a different product offering or so on.
and it's just about opening the market. Of course, brokers will always exist, especially the larger demand side. But now people want to search, well, less on search, they're looking for answers. We've moved from SEO to AEO now with answer optimization. They're putting in like the postcodes of all their employees saying, where's the best office location for us? Tell us more. So we need to feed good quality data and information. So people get to see the full market and get excited. We get excited all the time. We're going, oh, look at this huge array of offering that's available, to be able to show people that there's good quality options available. I think that's where I don't think people realise how many providers are sort of for London. We've got on the website with office tier list, we just started with London. There's 150 providers of flexible office space, and that's only central London. And we've got 600 buildings. That's a massive amount, but it's then customising it to help people find which ones are best for them, which brands are best. So it's quite an
Definitely. I love that matchmaking. It's very,
it
very
is. I think it's not until you see it working where you go, some people, they have hideous experiences, and often then you work out what's right for you. And it's like, oh, where's the compromise? Are you going to compromise on price, on location? That's the other ones of showing a bigger market instead of we're seeing business much more sort of location agnostic. They will go any sort of area in London much more. That's been quite interesting. Whereas before, people were very specific on, we needed to be here in London, this location, we must be in Mayfair, we must be here. Where now it's opening up, that's quite an interesting move that we're seeing.
Oh, I love that. So what do you think that that's driven by?
More traditionally with real estate, it has been the decision maker, CEO or person head of property. Now, especially with AI companies, we're seeing it's much more head of people, HR, decision makers as a team, as a group. And this is where AI comes into. It's a collective of people making a decision on location, as opposed to previously it's been very dictatorial approach with
Singular,
offices.
right?
And it's now thinking, we're seeing transport nodes coming up because everybody's just like wants the quickest commute. So that's where we're seeing the presence. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's more data driven decision making, much more higher expectations as well in the office. Any business is
If you're
going,
going to take me out of my house, I want to feel good when I'm in that space. I
yeah,
don't want to feel like I'm soulless. For me, I don't want to be freezing. I
yeah.
don't want to go to an overly air-conditioned space where I can't function because my brain is frozen. It's yeah, there's a lot of different nuances, isn't there, that people feel.
And also, I think because we're not staying in a job like my dad, he worked in one company 45 years, then retired and stuff. People are changing jobs more frequently, a rise of sort of sole entrepreneurs and different freelancers and everything. So we experience more office spaces, and the younger generation especially, they've seen different office qualities as well with different jobs and stuff. So I think that's the other one. Frequency of people going to different jobs, but also even visiting other offices, then the expectations get higher as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So you spent your time helping organizations stay relevant in changing markets. What separates businesses that continue to evolve from that slowly becoming obsolete? I think it's building on what we've talked about already.
Every company is an AI company. There's many quotes, you need to be using it somehow. I think the ones that are going to be obsolete are the ones not even at the sort of starting blocks and trying to work out how to be much more efficient, and looking at AI is two ways of going, how do you be more efficient what you're doing, but how can it enhance what you're doing as well? There's two sort of strands there. So I think that's where obsolete, everything's moving faster. I think any company that's not moving fast generally and not pushing in every direction is the ones that will be obsolete, to be quite honest. That's where I do see there that yeah, the speed of change and knowing and data. For myself with marketing, I have just, always say with marketing, you've got to have somebody who's much more that creative side with that sort of branded side of the business. Then you've always got to have that performance, much more the sales orientated side. And so you need a data analytics person there on that sort of driving that performance. But the skill set that is, I would say now needs to be in the mix is much more processes and automation. You need to be doing things at scale once it's working. And I think that's where we've seen really crucial importance of that sort of scalability and automation as a skill set now. And I think obsolete companies will be the ones that can't sort of systemize and process things. Even if it's highly customized or anything like that, you need to have sort of that layering in of processes.
I can hear, because you've mentioned AI a few times, you sound very positive when you speak about it. What's your perspective on AI and the workplace?
Yeah, I think for me, I think my hobby has been going on AI courses. That's been I've spent the last few years a professional hobbyist of going, and I think that's that curiosity of understanding and what's possible, what's happening, the speed of change is there. It's one to embrace. It's never going to be perfect, like with the internet or anything. There's going to be people that use it in the wrong way, people use it for good. So it's just purely embracing it, but always being quite mindful of ethics and everything else with use.
I think the other thing that I would add to that, that Andrew, who I chatted with on this podcast a number of sessions ago, he said AI will always derive from past. It does not have future thoughts. And so if you're an innovator, you can't ask AI to support you in innovation. It will only go off of what is existing in the marketplace for the last hundreds of years. And so you can use that to bolster yourself, but you cannot use it to create new. And I think that's where the comfort lies. We're so nervous, so many of us, I'm not, but a lot of the naysayers towards AI, besides the cooling system, which a lot of people struggle with, and maybe the investment in it as well, would argue that our jobs are going to be lost. And I don't see that. I think that if you're moving ahead, like you say, and you do have to move ahead at a rapid pace because that's the way the world is working now. So if you rest, then there might be an issue. But if you embrace it and learn about it and garner the power as much as you can, then actually you may just thrive.
And it's the other one is fascinating now with investment side in some ways. Anybody can create an app on Lovable. All these the
I
plethora of
created one. I did. That's so funny. Yes. I
and
think
it's
I think it took me like less than 20 minutes to create the whole thing.
yeah,
Amazing. Yes.
and so people easier to set up companies much quicker and things like that. But it's what ones are going to have that true attraction, build the audience, find a real need, and things like that. Like say,
Yeah.
technology
Provide
for
value.
technology's sake. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the interesting one. We're at there, everybody excited creating, apps on Lovable. Where's it going to go next? It will suddenly move to the next level.
Yeah. Well, and I think there is going to be a moment where we can't sustain the investment that it takes for the data warehouses to create the thinking centers that is required. I think we will come to a point like that. For me, I don't personally see it as being a bubble burst because I think there's like the tech bubble of early 2000s where everything just collapsed. I can't see that happening, but I can see there being a shift from the amount of investment into a more steady investment. I think it's high growth right now and it's going to plateau, but it's always going to be required. And then it'll be built on in some way that we don't know yet and maybe, incredible. I don't know. scientists, engineers already know what our future is. But but it's not going anywhere. This is how I feel.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I think that's where I just take it. It's, it's like,
I love
um,
that you're saying you're a hobbyist to it. I think that's fantastic.
it's more, just constantly reading, going on courses. And I think the other one that's fascinating, you used to have like Excel on your CV, like, and it used
Yeah,
to
that's
say,
so true. What level are you at? Yes.
is, you've had that on your CV, and now anybody would just go, what? But it's like micro skilling so much. You're having to upskill on the new software. I think that's the interesting one. Going back to that point on sort of speed there, that's really interesting. But I still take it back to people were scared when the calculator came about. That's the other one, because then they were worried that you wouldn't use your brain and things like that. But then you use your brain in different ways, like the sat nav or anything else, where people were scared, going, will you remember how to get anywhere or anything like
So glad to have sat now. I don't know what I would do. I'd be very lost.
that. And it's like we did like I just remember those A to Z's of London having to, read London maps to work out where to go and things. So yeah, it's
Yeah, Canada's much better on the grid system. And I
um,
grew up with the mountains directly west. And so there was no point in the city where you couldn't see the mountains. And you just knew that's west, so I must be going north or south or east because I'm walking away from the mountains. So you could quite quickly figure out. And then their numbers started Center Street, which was zero, and went in one through, hundreds or thousands.
much easier. Gosh.
And everything was a box. So you just knew. And everything was the exact same size of box. So in New York, it's I can't remember which one. It's either the streets or one of them's twice the length than the other or three times the length than the other. You're unfortunate if you don't know which is which and then you start walking the wrong direction for a very long time before you have to turn around. When I first moved to New York, that happened. But yeah, no, Canada is a very, very easy system. And then you come here and it's all, topsy-turvy. It's all over the place. The
I
magical
do
world.
send my husband quite often, like driving in the dark in Somerset. He's like, "How do you know where to go?" And I think that intuition and stuff like that.
And I've almost fallen off this cliff before. I remember I need to start turning early.
It's just like, things. But yeah, you get scared by that because he's just like, "How do you know where to go?"
So true. Oh yes. James is also from Somerset, so I've experienced it. Okay, we're going to wrap up because I know that we spent a lot of time together and I've loved it. And the one thing I will say that I love talking to Zoe about is she's a fellow entrepreneur. She is about a year ahead of Crux. That's how we originally met. And we've remained in each other's lives for all of this time, supporting each other through the entrepreneurial journey, but also through the work that we're actually doing. If anyone's curious to have her back on the show and talk about the entrepreneurial journey, we'll do that as well. So definitely drop us a line if you're interested in that. So we always like to finish the same question for every guest, and I'll say, Zoe, drawing on your years of experience, researching workplaces, advising organization, and understanding what makes places succeed, what's the crux of it? When you strip away the trends, the technology, and the headlines, what's the one fundamental principle every leader should remember when creating places where people genuinely want to be?
For me, it always comes back to people. I think with AI especially, I keep on and the world in its going and things like that, always going back to just first principle, always thinking, keeping it simple. I think that's the big one for me. And like, what do people want? Not it's too easy to overcomplicate in this world and stuff. And often we will do lots of data and research, but we're often going back with some really simple thinking and trying to, you know, commercial complexity there's a lot of, but really keeping it simple and just going, and often that is going, what do people want? What's the best solution there? So yeah, it was easy to overcomplicate it, get scared in different things of how we're going to work with this digital world and how it blends with the physical world and different things. It will, and there will always be, like, I think that magic where people always, the differences of people.
Brilliant answer. Thank you so much for joining us
No
today.
worries.
It's been a fascinating conversation. If people want to learn more about you, follow your work, or find out more about Office Tier List or Spaces to Places, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
LinkedIn's the best platform there for myself. So yeah, just reach out and it's quite easy with my name, Zoe Ellis-Moore. It's easy to find. I think there's only one other Zoe Ellis-Moore, I think, in the world. So you're okay. It's like,
So no Spaces to Places, Zoe Ellis-Moore, you've got it.
yeah, you'll find me.
That's great. You're lucky. I think there's a few more Heather Saunders out there. If you'd like to learn more about Crux Design Studio, our work designing workplaces, laboratories, retail spaces, manufacturing, and so forth, or you'd like to continue the conversation, you can find us on LinkedIn as well and visit our website, www.crux-studio.com, and subscribe to the Crux of It. Please click the subscribe button wherever you get your podcast. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, we'd really appreciate if you would request to follow and leave us a review and share some of the ideas of what you'd like to hear more about. And that includes bringing Zoe back on and talking about anything else that you have heard today, because she is just really tipped the top of the iceberg of all of her incredible knowledge, and we haven't even discussed the entrepreneurial journey yet. Thank you so much for listening, and Zoe, thank you so much for coming today.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.